Yesterday's video was pretty heavy and it just, quite frankly, needed to be made. So today I wanted to cover something that's a little bit more lighthearted. And just in case you didn't know, you shouldn't put your gun in your oven and turn it on. I didn't know if you knew that or not, but apparently somebody didn't know that, and it was a slow news day yesterday because that's all the news outlets that plug into Google felt like covering yesterday. This seems like an opportune time to talk about medical equipment, so today's video is brought to you by Medical Gear Outfitters. We don't talk about medical enough. Oftentimes it gets relegated to the background. Lots of people carry guns, but don't carry basic things like tourniquets, for instance. Well, the place that I use is Medical Gear Outfitters. You've heard about them before. They're good people over there. They've got everything from like your specialized kits for like car accidents and stuff like that to the individual items where you need like chest seals, tourniquets, or you need something to fix Timmy's scraped up knee. You can get it all over there at Medical Gear Outfitters, and they do offer you guys a discount, and you can find all that information over at the affiliates page. I don't need to plug it any more than that, but what I will leave you with is, even if you don't know how to use all of the equipment, having the equipment so that maybe somebody comes along that does know how to use it, will have the tools that they need to help people, is a responsibility that we should all take. All right, so to give you guys a little bit of context, every morning and night, just to kind of track what's going on, I type guns and gun into Google and hit the news tab. And this is a really good way to determine the attack angles that are currently being used by the corporate media and establishment media. They all collude together. They all run the same stories, and they do this every single day. They write something somewhere to paint firearms ownership and firearms owners in a negative light. That's their modus operandi. That's what they do. They're good for it every single day. And today does not disappoint. This is out of Chesterfield County, Virginia, of all places. And as far as I can tell, this fits the standard narrative of gun owners are stupid people that do careless, dumb things, basically, is what the whole press corps has written here. But there's some interesting tidbits here. So this homeowner calls the fire department and says, my oven blew up. And they go to the residence and find, indeed, the oven that is, at least appears to be in electric range, has exploded. And when they get inside of it, they find a firearm that has discharged. So I think what has probably happened here is this is probably a case of forgetfulness, or there are multiple people that live in that home, and somebody had a firearm that they didn't want everybody else in the home to know that they had a firearm, and they quickly stashed it in the oven so that nobody would find it. In that temporary instance, they forgot about it, and months later, Granny goes in there to fire up what appears to be a pizza. There's definitely a pizza sheet in the oven. Now, that might just be stored there. I store my pizza sheet in the oven, so I can say that. But somebody went in there to fire something up in the oven, and in the process, they cooked off a gun. So if you're not familiar with cooking off, basically you heat the gun up enough, either through shooting it a whole bunch, or in this case, putting it in a freaking oven and turning it on 475 and imparting enough heat to cook the actual propellant inside of the cartridge. Now, it says that multiple rounds went off. It said 5 rounds went off. So I am going to make an assumption, and that assumption is that the first round, the round in the chamber, went off, and then it subsequently loaded some more based on what I see in the photo that we'll get to here in a second. Because if the ammunition had gone off in the magazine, then the gun typically destroys itself when you have a magazine detonation. So it did destroy the oven. It took the whole front of it off, and this is a pretty dangerous situation to find yourself in. because that first round's going to go off, and regardless of the orientation of the gun, we can probably assume that whoever set the gun into the oven probably set it facing the wall, so facing the back, just because that's how you hold a firearm, and they probably put it in the oven, and they either had it pointed left or right or straight back. Typically, you don't put the gun in, muzzle pointed at you. This is not a way that you handle a firearm, particularly when it's obviously loaded. So I would say that the first one goes off and cooks right into the stove, and it's going to go right through that stove, right? That's sheet metal. It's going to go right through that stove, and depending on what the wall material is on the other side, maybe through the wall as well. Now, that's the safest round that went off. The other 4 rounds that were reported, that gun is no longer pointed in whatever orientation that is. It has jumped around somewhere, and it is now pointed at some other orientation in the room, and it is now cooking off those rounds. And each time that firearm goes off is going to shoot likely in a different direction. So not a good situation. At least that's what we would expect would happen. Except for in this instance, that's not what happened. If you look at the photographs that I'll throw up on screen now, you can see that what actually happened was, because this was a polymer frame handgun, the polymer of the frame actually sunk into the grill bars in the oven. And while the gun was discharging, the firearm stayed stationary, because this thing is far too perfectly in the center of the grill bars. It's like somebody set it in there and then it never moved as it was cooking. So that whole thing that they always do with the polymer frame handguns, well, they could pass through a metal detector and all those, they're super dangerous. Actually, in this instance, kept it from being a more dangerous situation than it otherwise could have been. Now, I wouldn't rely on the polymer holding it into place, but in this instance, it did. If it had been one of those fully metal framed handguns with a limited capacity that the leftists, well, I wouldn't say that they want you to have, but the status quo has relegated them to okaying those ones. If you had had one of the lefty approved pistols, then that thing would have discharged and bounced all over that oven, sending bullets in all kinds of different directions. Now, the other thing that's interesting, if we go back to the oven, is, again, we are assuming that the firearm was put into the oven like this, and then as it is pointing uniformly towards the grill bars, that it would be facing the back of the oven. And actually, a further analysis of the photographic evidence points to the fact that this is not the case. In fact, you can see it in there. You can see the muzzle pointing out the front of the oven. You would assume that somebody putting the firearm in the oven after loading it would not hold it like this and put it in the oven. They would hold the gun away from themselves so the loaded gun wasn't pointing at them, and then forget that it is in there. You simply do not handle a firearm this way. Nobody picks up a gun and immediately points it at themselves and then puts it into a thing. First, I thought that there might be an overpressure that caused the glass to break, but after looking at the photographic evidence, I can say that it is my opinion that this photo is staged. Given the widespread sharing of this story, I believe that this photo was staged. This incident was staged in some way, shape, or form, and is being used as fodder in the media to push a narrative that gun owners are irresponsible. But hey, if you believe this story as presented by the corporate media, then you SIG people out there finally got a win. The firearm malfunctioned in such a way as to make the situation safer than it otherwise would have been, because the frame melted into the grill bars, preventing it from bouncing all over the oven and shooting in random directions. Which functioning, malfunctioning, or regular functioning in a manner that is safer than expected is not something that we can typically say for Sig Sauer firearms. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments section down below. Was this a staged incident for clicks to discredit you and I, Or is this a dumb person that found a gun in their house, didn't know what to do with it, shoved it in the oven?